Hello, my friends. It is I, Rich Filiberto, DM Philly out here on the internet, back with you again, a little bit late, but very excited to be talking about House of the Dragon, season 2, episodes 5 and 6. We missed episode 5 last week because I was in bed sick, much like the king in the Red Keep. But I'm doing much better than him these days. So we have reunited. We're going to unpack the last 2 weeks of House of the Dragon. And I, of course, am not alone. I am joined by the queen of the podcast, protector of the RSS feed, and a woman who most assuredly should have her own dragon, the one and only LaTonya Starks.
I want a dragon, damn it. Like, I don't know what sorcery needs to be done. I'm sure if there is sorcery that someone listening can help, but I would like a dragon, people. Let's get LT a dragon.
There was a great deal of speculation about the 3 eggs that got sent out towards the Vale and how there was an extra egg. It was only supposed to be 3 eggs. It's 3 eggs in the book. They say 3 eggs, but there were 4 eggs in the box. So it feels like maybe there's at the very least an extra dragon egg out there for you, LT.
Yeah, I'll get married and have a witch kill my husband if it means I get a dragon.
Honestly, depending on like her going rate, get her in touch with me. I've got like a couple of people on a list, a la Arya Stark, that could be dealt with. Of course, I'm just going to stop down before I forget, because I always forget. This is Screen and Page Podcast. If you are listening to us or you found us anywhere out there on the internet at large, you should subscribe to the podcast feed. We're talking about a bunch of good TV. The Acolyte finale was last week. The Boys season 4 finale was last week. The first 5 episodes of Cobra Kai season 6 dropped on Netflix. I got together with Marissa and Jason Reed and unpacked those. We're doing a lot of fun stuff. So make sure that you subscribe and rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening to it. And that's super helpful to me, and I will be grateful and thank you. These podcasts, of course, available over on YouTube at Screen and Page, as well as all of our Acolyte season 1 coverage over there. Some more video coverage coming as we go at Screen Page Pod, or all of our social medias. Go follow those. And there's a link tree in the bios that can bring you into the Discord where you can hit us all up directly. That's my housekeeping, LT. We got a couple of interesting weeks of House of the Dragon to talk about. After the big battle in episode 4, it has been a much kind of slower, intimate, more pensive couple of weeks of character development, rebuilding this momentum. So before we get into anything specific, I'm curious how that's working for you, because I'm beginning to see some mixed receptions from like a generally pretty positive fandom this season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would be able to personally handle it if every episode was a dragon battle, because it would definitely mean we were losing characters that we've learned to grow and love, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I like taking some time to stop down and like get into the palace intrigue of it all, get into the like war making that's happening, to see what's happening at each of the small council meetings. Like, that stuff is great. And I'm a big fan of character development. And I think that, you know, having slower moments like these couple episodes pays off a lot when it gets to those dragon battles, because all that character development pays off.
I'm so with you there. You know, I think the shorter runtime this season of 8 episodes compared to 10 creates this sense of expectation. We know we're going into the penultimate episode next week. How much ground can we really cover? But I mean, notoriously, back at our alma mater at PSR, you covered House of the Dragon season 1 through the Versus podcast, where you were relating it to Game of Thrones. And I think it's easy to forget how robust Game of Thrones is. I mean, that's like 80 episodes of TV all said, done, a little less, 75. But it doesn't really like explode into the mainstream zeitgeist until Red Wedding stuff, season 4. Like, there's 30 episodes building these characters up before we even get to that kind of major shoe dropping. And I feel like you're spot on that these are the moments that just saturate us in who these people are and in an intimate understanding of what's driving them, so that when it comes to these big heightened conflicts, we're really invested and we give a shit that it's not just like CGI dragons exploding and fireballs on the sky. We're really rooting for the people, you know? And I think in that way, House of the Dragon has challenges that Game of Thrones didn't, where it is such a kind of soap opera. It's so rooted in that political intrigue and in the family of the Targaryen specifically. We talked about early on your note of the way it's like a historical drama. It's like The Crown with dragons, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm really enjoying the majority of what we're getting. Like, will I be happy when we have a resolution to whatever the hell is happening in Harrenhal at this point?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yes.
mm-hmm.
I will be glad when we know the point of Alice Rivers, because they've presented us with a really cool character, but we're not really sure what all of this is leading up to.
Mm-hmm.
But we know for the rest of our other characters, like, I think they were very well seated in season 1. So we have already a good idea of what their motivations are and what they're trying to accomplish. You really can't, I mean, this is all part of what it's like to be at war, like
Mm-hmm.
it can't be all like go, 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 dragon battle, dragon battle. Not that there are real dragon battles, but you know what I mean. Like, we can't just be dropping bombs all the time. We've got to take some time to like figure out the politicking and discuss the small folk and like see where our allies are and if we even have any allies.
For sure. I mean, there's the element where it's like storytelling 101. We have to understand the goals of the characters. So we do need to like slow it down. And cadence, to your point, I mean, to set a good pace, you can't have nonstop harrowing action for 8 episodes straight. We have to kind of slow it down to breathe and exist in the moment. But I'm with you. We're rebuilding the stakes. I do feel, as somebody that's read the book, I talk a lot about how we're adapting such a kind of microscopic amount of material, right? We're really filling in so much that is unsaid in the text in terms of conveying the motivations of these people and looking at the real humanity behind them, when the book is written a little bit like bullet points of the historical high notes through many lenses of perception. It's very kind of colored in that way. But I feel this bit of reticence for them to advance too fast. And I'm so kind of curious. I know they've talked about a 3-season projection, but I'm just really curious, like how much of this show we're actually going to get. Do you think we're still like on track for 3 seasons, 4 seasons? Have you heard more about that I haven't, or?
I haven't heard more about it. I mean, if they can close it out in a satisfactory manner in 3 seasons, I would say sure. But I lean toward 4 just because of what we went through with Game of Thrones and people trying to like close things out too quickly so they can go make a Star Wars movie that didn't happen. Like I would rather we, do more character development and figure out what's going to happen. Now, if there's not enough story to get us to a 4th season, then it would make sense for it to come to a natural end. But I don't know. It seems like they're introducing new characters, all the time. So there should be enough story for us.
I think so too. And I tend to really not want them to rush it. I think the end of Game of Thrones is better than we remember it as, but it's certainly rushed. And that's the fundamental strain that's on it, is you feel the way that the pace accelerates such that it hadn't prior. So I'm kind of glad that they're taking their time. And it's really interesting to me to see this kind of mixed reception that we've been getting. I mean, in certain ways, I think that House of the Dragon could really be a better show, but it's also got an uphill climb in that we're missing our Davoses and our Tyrions and like, Daenerys Rivers, and she's awesome so far, but like the Red Woman Melisandre, she is not yet. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
These characters were so impactful, but we had time to really establish them. So I love the expanding of the cast beyond the immediate Targaryen family. I think this is really important to get a smattering of different types of people in the ensemble as we're kind of moving it forward.
Yeah, and these last couple episodes have also given us some time to really miss Rhaenys.
Oh, really?
Like,
for sure.
Like I found myself, and I mean, this is like a mourning period also for the Blacks as well. I mean, for the Greens, but like the Greens just happen to have, like heirs to spare, in terms of Aemon, and so they're just trying to go on as they as they can. But like, you really get the sense that like real mourning is taking place on the black side. And Rhaenys is a character, as well as Meleys, worth mourning.
For sure. I mean, the Greens have heirs to spare, such that they have heirs off screen that we haven't even met yet. Young Darren, who we're hearing so much about this week's episode. And I'm
Sounds
with you,
great.
Right?
Sounds like a great kid.
Sounds like a real great kid, raised pretty far from that high tower tree in the court. But to your point, the blacks are in this real period of mourning, right? I mean, Aegon, for whatever it's worth, he does get dragged back barely alive, but he is alive laying in his bed. And we've lost Rhaenys, and it's easy to kind of lose perspective of the timeline, but Rhaenyra just like buried a baby. I mean, there's been a great deal of death, right? Like our sweet little prince got eaten over the gullet not that long ago. Like there has been a lot of loss on the side of the black pretty quickly, and it's building up. So you already invoked it. I guess let's start with zany Uncle Daemon and his no good, very bad dreams at Harrenhal, LT. So we're into episode 6, and Daemon Targaryen, who was this bombastic, incredible, like daring prince through season 1 that had a real kind of fandom around him, has been just having crazy dreams for many episodes, holed up in his rotting old castle, dealing with old Simon Strong and Alice Rivers making his tea every night. Like, how's this working for you after 6 episodes?
I think it was around the episode 5 when I realized that Daemon was having sex with his mother that I said, okay, we're good. Like, I would be okay if there were a resolution to this. And
Daemon
then we get
Oedipus Targaryen, as we call him.
Exactly. And then we get to this episode, and he's just reduced to tears. I would like to know what's going on. I mean, it's been fun to play with this a little bit because we've gotten to have Millie Alcock back, and then we this week we get to have Paddy Considine back. So that's always fun, and it's interesting to go back and watch that first season conversation between Viserys and Daemon, because it is like just an echo of the conversation they have during season 2. It's like eerie, but I mean, I get it. Like, man's haunted, all right? Like, he's not accomplishing anything. He doesn't know when he's asleep or when he's awake, and he's ruining everything in the Riverlands. You know, I feel the way that I feel like Caraxes probably feels, which is like, can we go home? Can we get away from Harrenhal, please? Like,
what
you
are we
just brought
doing
me here to sit in the Godswood and scream? Like, what? And like feel you having really messed up dreams? Can we just go home?
Poor Caraxes. He's already got that deviated septum. Now he has to deal with this nonsense. I really like a lot of the content that we're getting at. I do feel like the mother scene was very unclear to a lot of people, right? And a lot of folks I saw in the immediate aftermath, like feeling like, was that Emma? Was that supposed to be Viserys's wife? And it kind of took a minute to get there. I appreciate exploring the humanity of this guy, right? I've spent a couple of weeks here just talking about like, he's a bad man, and we should be careful championing him. There's a little bit of me being like over kind of exposed to toxic relationships on like my big mainline TV shows that I'm just not entirely on board with. Like, I do not support the Daemon and Rhaenyra relationship. This is not healthy. It's never been healthy. That said, he's just an infinitely fascinating character. He's really fun to have in the story and track. And I like exploring the humanity of him. Like the stuff with Paddy Considine this week was electric. And there's a little bit to me that's like, God, this is ballsy. You're literally like bringing this guy back on set to refilm a scene that you filmed already. And when you look at that side by side, I mean, it's like verbatim line after line, but the performance and the delivery is so different, where it was, you know, Viserys is charged with anger in that first confrontation in season 1. This hostility and this immediate kind of Targaryen rage. It's the fire, but there's such lamentation and pain. He's so sorrowful in this new interpretation of it as we get it kind of echoed back, and to see it kind of break Daemon and the weight of it on him, like, oh God, I failed you. Like, you're my brother and I failed you because of my pride and my hubris. And the way that he gets locked in the throne room at the end, I really love that as a choice because it feels to me so emblematic of the way that lineage, it was a Daenerys Targaryen issue that we can talk about how well they dealt with it. But the way that like this lineage hangs like this looming shadow of expectation over these peoples born with these names of prominence, they're like recycling the names again and again through the generations. And they have these legendary figures in history that they're trying to live up to, and how they reconcile that, the ways that they're never taught to unpack it. All of that said, after 6 weeks, I'm like, can we get this guy out of this building, please?
Yeah. And also everything that he's doing is just making Rhaenyra look bad.
Yeah. As he's like authorizing war crimes across the Riverlands, right?
Authorizing war crimes, having the people hosting him not be not sure like who they're dealing with and like what's going on with this guy. Like he's just like sleepy all the time and he doesn't seem to know where he is and he's like sleepwalking. And I'm sure they're like, seriously, this is the dude that Rhaenyra sent to be her envoy? And no one really knows what's going on with them as a couple because Rhaenyra is getting all of this as well. She's just like, well, please, can people please stop bringing up Daemon to me? He's clearly not here and he is needed. So he's not here. He's not helping. So just stop bringing him up. But I mean, like if I was in the Riverlands, I don't know who I would support because Rhaenyra's side, like the blacks look like clowns because of Daemon.
It's very out of control, you know? I think that it's easy. A lot of viewers I see really indexing on the Alice Rivers stuff and like, how is he not putting it together that she's kind of doing this to him or that she would be the root cause? But I think it can be easy for us to overlook the Targaryens are weird, man. Like, lest we forget, Viserys was having these visions and like believed he was waiting all his life to kind of have this prophecy, have this vision. Aegon is like driven to like make the conquest because of a vision. The whole notion of the Song and Ice of Fire, the way it's kind of hanging over the dynasty during this show and being presented that way. I think there's a real element of Daemon uncertain how much of this is just internally being manifested by the isolation and the conflict and the kind of self-doubt that he has. This is a guy who has not had to reflect a lot on his actions. I don't think he's a very like act and deal with it after the fact kind of individual. And to just be sitting in this castle waiting and having to dwell in his mistakes, which are many across his life, and have that all just like build up. I appreciate the kind of lack of clarity there. To the Alice Rivers, how's all this work? And we get the bit of like, okay, Grover Tully, he's finally done. He's a dead man. They sent their best healer, Alice Rivers. It's like, oh my gosh, dude. Some of this is a little on the nose in ways that like early seasons of Game of Thrones would never. But I appreciate that they're being pretty straightforward about it in terms of a more economical story that won't be 80 episodes long. How you feeling about Alice so far?
I appreciate that she, whatever it is that she is doing, has thrown someone who is so sure of himself completely off kilter. Like he doesn't know if he's coming or going. And it's kind of interesting to see a character like Daemon be in a position like that because Daemon is the type of, you know, beg forgiveness, don't ask for permission kind of character that seems to always know where he's headed and always know what he wants. But he's being haunted so much by his past that he can't even seem to make heads or tails of what's happening. So it's interesting that you know, to like be able to throw someone off kilter like that. But like, what is the payoff of it? That's what I'm waiting for. And I don't know if the payoff is going to be sweeter because we waited so many episodes for it, or if it's something that could have been resolved earlier. Like that's the type of thing that we're not going to know about until we can assess the season at the end after everything has happened.
Yeah, well said. I really love the actress. I love the whole vibe with her. But I'm there. I mean, these two characters are so intertwined that I like what we're getting, but I am starting to be concerned with like the kind of rate of movement. I figure that next week something's gotta give here one way or another, but we'll see. And I think you're spot on that it's gonna take the whole season for us to kind of reflect on how well this all worked. So King's Landing. We had last week in episode 5. Here comes Kristen Cole. He's marching back in. He's got the head of Mellies. We're starting to see some of the small folk choose the titling of episode 6 beginning to respond to this as this dead dragon's head is wheeled through the streets of King's Landing, surrounded by flies. And the whole kind of response from the common folk of I thought they were gods. Jaehaerys is such a kind of minor character on the show as like the old king. We talk about him in the context that he had this long reign of peace, as it were. But the whole idea in the text is that he worked with his best friend is like Septon Barth, one of these high septons, and they worked together to develop this doctrine of Targaryen exceptionalism that they sell to the people, right? Of no, we're like gods. Do you see? We fly around on the giant fire lizards, so we must be godlike. And it really builds up this whole kind of mythology around the family that empowers the dynasty to hold power. And this feels like a real like card, a pretty integral card in the house that has been pulled as the people are beginning to respond to this. And we're a couple of weeks out. I've listened to a lot of folks talking about the episodes, but the allusions to they've all been locked in the city by our new hand, our new heir apparent in Aemon, in much the same way that Cersei did. We're going to like weaponize the innocents to make sure that we have a bolster. And they're like, we want meat, give us meat. As Hugh here is going to tell us, no, it's just meat. All of this is setting up some interesting stuff to me that feels very kind of overt.
Yeah, without Otto, they're just a bunch of warriors. They're
Yes.
not politicians. And so they're terrible when it comes to dealing with the small folk. And we see in the most recent episode that Aemon just has a fundamental misunderstanding of the small folk. He's just like, well, why are they blaming us and not blaming Rhaenyra? Well, you're there. You're supposed to be ruling over them, and you're supposed to be doing it for the good of the realm according to what they think, and they're starving. So of course, like that's like politics 101. It's like keep the people like fed and housed.
Oh yeah, the gas prices go up. You could have problems, man.
Yeah. And when you're not able to do that, they're going to turn against you. And then, when you have the idiotic idea, like, the blacks are concerned about lessening the Targaryen legacy by having, lesser Targaryens fly on dragons. What do you think the Greens are doing by parading a dead dragon head through the streets to show to people? Like, they're really just, putting the writing on the wall for their own demise, and they don't realize that they're doing it.
Yeah, I love the way it's embodied by Kristen Cole, like in the beginning of 5 when he's walking ahead through the street and he like doesn't get it. They're all, to your point, these posturing, testosterone-filled warriors, and they're coming back from like this very Pyrrhic victory with at least one trophy that they expect to get some kind of accolades and some applause from. And it's so haunting and chilling. And their kind of lack of awareness at the way it sort of lowers their own station is really fascinating. We talk about him. Aemond is back, as is Prince Aegon. All the stuff with the armor removal. This is the stuff that they're just so good at on these shows. It's so chilling, It really is like car wreck where you can't look away, but it's pretty horrifying to look at. It felt like they really captured Martin's words off the page for all of this, but the way that it's going to set up Aemond to kind of come into the small council and seize control, and we see Alicent relegated as she is to this kind of position, like drowned in the kind of din of silence as the weight of her situation kind of comes crashing back on her. I love everything that we're kind of setting up here.
That scene with Alicent making her case as to why she should rule because she's done it before, and then just being overruled by these people that she thought were in her corner. Like, her son is out to get her. Her former lover is just like, listen, I just do what the Dragon Lord says now. Like, I don't really have a spine anymore.
I hate
And
that guy.
yeah, and Laris, someone that she worked closely with in the past, like, also going against her. Like, she really doesn't have, with her father gone, she doesn't have anyone who's in her corner at all. And so for them to just drown out the noise of what's actually happening in the small council and stay focused on Alicent and like her facial expressions, like Olivia Cook is hilarious if you
She
just
really
watch
is.
the faces that she makes at people. Like, one of the most laugh out loud moments in the entirety of this show is when they're at the funeral in season 1, and they do the shot of her looking at Rhaenyra while Rhaenyra is looking at Daemon, and she just has stank face the whole time. She's hilarious. So every time Aemon says something, she's like, really, idiot? Like, this is what you have to offer? This is what I'm being passed over for? And it's very, honestly, reminiscent of when Roe v. Wade got overturned.
Yeah, no joke.
And everyone was like, well, we didn't think that they were going to come for like this. Like, we empowered all of the people who ran on this platform, but we didn't think they were going to actually get rid of Roe v. Wade. It's like, you were the one who, for whatever reason, like, you let your father get into your head and convince you that Rhaenyra was going to put your children to the sword. And so you fought for them to take over. Now that's happening, which means that you are relegated to the side.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're concerned about the outcome. You push for this.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what, like, making us sit with her in that moment. Like, this show is so good at making me identify with and feel sorry for characters that I typically would not feel sorry for.
I'm 100% with you. Just Olivia Cook's fantastic, and in a show that is grievously missing a lot of the comedic, lighter elements that Game of Thrones had once upon a time. We don't have those kind of characters like a Tyrion. Even like, you go Laris to Littlefinger. Like, Littlefinger was fun to hang out with sometimes.
Yeah.
Laris is not fun, man.
No.
None of these people are fun, LT. Like, not since the days of Little Rhaenyra killing boars are we really like enjoying hanging out with these people. They're all so conflicted and so kind of nefarious in certain ways, and ruthless is probably the better descriptor, but sympathetic. They're really doing a good job creating sympathy for unsympathetic characters, from Daemon to Alicent. And I love like what you identify of like, what did you think? Like, what did you think? Like Otto kind of like told you who he is. He showed you his whole life what these children would become if you led them down this path, and you did. And it's not, absent on me again that we note, like, but Prince Darren, he grew up away far from here. And I love that scene with her brother, with Gowan, being like, no, he seems like he's cool. It's like he got the Tom and seal of approval. Like, at least we got 1 out of 3 ain't bad.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, I mean, Helena is great. Like, Helena is an honorary Black as far as I'm concerned. She doesn't want to be there. She just wants to play with her bugs.
Yep. Too true. So just to the rest of the King's Landing stuff, as we really like kind of advance it in episode 6, and episode 6, the small folk, and we're going to see Aemon now. He gets this kind of call from Jason Lannister, one of our twins out there in the West, and he loses it, that he's like, I'm not a dog to heel. I am the Prince Regent. And he then seizes command of everything, cut down the rat catchers, let's like deal with all the problems as we have to deal with them. And then again, this kind of second moment as Alicent's now going to come to him and kind of challenge him a little bit. Like, haven't you been vindicated of all the injustices that you suffered as a child? Haven't you like gotten your share back? And the way that he just sends her off, LT, it's so like dismissive, but it's not like vitriolic. It seems like there's not animosity there. There's just like this very sexist pragmatism to Aemon of like, yeah, okay, so you did a great job filling the spot while there was nobody else to really be here. But what do you want? Like, you're my mother. You have no official role here. And she gives him basically what she gave to Aegon before episode 4 of like, you know what you need to do? Nothing. Go do nothing. Get out of here. And it's just like incredible to kind of watch Aemon begin to seize these trappings of power and wield them the way that he is, as ruthlessly as he is.
Yeah, he is. I mean, the thing about Aemond is that he's such a fascinating character that I don't get tired of him being a terrible person, because it's great to watch. And Ewan Mitchell is such a good actor that
he really is great in this part.
yeah, he's so good in this role that everything that he does, I'm like, all right, that was detestable, but I would like to see more of it. I mean, I for one, I'm gonna miss Allison in those small council meetings, because she was the one person who, wasn't afraid to speak up to her son, because that's her son, and it's for that reason, for her to seem like she's undermining his authority, that she was dismissed in the first place. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen now. Like, what is Allison going to do? Because he literally dismissed her to go do more domestic things. And she's already said that she won't be married to someone as like a political tool. That's
Queen
out of the
shit.
question. Yeah. So what does that leave for Alicent to do exactly?
It's really interesting to explore. There's some real changes in terms of like the weight in the book and the emphasis where we're putting it on which characters are making which decisions. So I don't want to like index on it too hard, but I'm really fascinated as well to see how her role emerges across the next couple of episodes and where it sort of leaves her moving into a season 3, being sidelined in this way. The thing about Aemon that I really like is there's a little bit that I get from him of like, he's this kid that never believed in himself and that had all of those kind of negative self-loathing feelings validated by his shitty sibling and empowered by like his not the best cousins who would laugh at like his brother's mean jokes to him.
Right.
And so all of this kind of like poisonous, like self-speech rattling around in his head, the voices of all of these people in his family rooting him down, that at a certain point this kid decides F it, like we ball, and he goes and gets Vhagar. And from that moment, and from like the success of that moment, he's living this like fake it till you make it kind of persona. This guy just keeps his back straight, he looks everybody cold, stone cold with that one eye, and he fully has like drank his own Kool-Aid. He believes his own bullshit. The hype is real. And it almost doesn't matter if anybody else believes anything, he will impose that will upon you, And it's really just fascinating to see him force the respect out of all these people around him the way that he does. He just kind of brute forces through this environment unlike anybody else. And it's really, really compelling to watch. I love the way that he has elevated Daemon as this kind of nemesis that he has, when the reality is like, bro, your uncle doesn't give a crap about you beyond the fact that you have this big giant dragon. Like, that is the only relevant factor, And it's such a kind of lopsided rivalry that I really sort of love it. It's like shades of Arya and her list, right? Of like Arya spending her life like, I will kill you, Cersei Lannister. And like Cersei Lannister never thought about you again after so
she's
long.
like, you still alive?
Yeah. I just love that imbalance and like the way that it fuels him and is driving him to be this kind of maniac,
Yeah, especially because he's like, I will face my uncle if he'll face me. And it's like, remember that one time that your uncle was standing right there and you left the room because you were afraid to face him? You had Vhagar then too, but I guess now it's a time of war. So we'll see. It would be, I don't know what's going to happen if we're ever going to get that actual showdown, or if the prophecy of you're going to die in this place of Harrenhal is going to be accurate for Daemon. But I'm interested to see what's going to happen, because the idea of Daemon Light beating Daemon would be really funny.
It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, we'll see where we get with all of that. The other big note here is that Aemond is like, but let's go make an alliance with the Triarchy. And the Triarchy is like, this other place. It's these 3 city states that allied, that we had Corlys trying to deal with all of season 1, and Daemon's down there with the crab feeder and everything. So the notion that Aemond is looking to kind of like expand for some unconventional alliances, I think is kind of relevant for us to keep in mind going forward. We haven't talked about it much, but on the Team Black side, we got all sorts of movement happening. But really, the stuff this week with episode 6, obviously, Jace is going to go make this alliance with the twins, and he offers them Harrenhal. That always works out great for everybody in the end, which I love seeing Jace like getting active. There's this point in the book where they kind of do this thing. George Martin is so rooted in writing his very medieval fantasy, and the text of the book is so kind of through the filter of these many men that are telling and retelling this history over time, that they talk about how like during this window, Rhaenyra like almost falls to obscurity, that she's still lamenting like the miscarriage and the death of her son, and that Jace steps up into the fore and starts making all of these decisions as the kind of leadership of Team Black, right? And so I just like him getting a little piece of that, because the show is keeping Rhaenyra front and center, as I think they should. But seeing Jace go to the twins, like old familiar location, make a deal, very fun. Except then he's going to come home to mom and be like, "Where's Uncle Daemon? We need Daemon."
Right.
He is like fed up, man. She has heard enough about Daemon Targaryen, LT.
Yeah, especially because you went and did this without asking my permission first. So not only, do I have to begrudgingly say you did a good job because you accomplished a little something, but you're gonna come and annoy me and ask me when Daemon is coming home. You know as much as I know about Daemon. Like, I'm not gonna send another raven that he's not gonna respond to.
It's really great. I kind of love the conflict there. I love the relationship between the two of them, and her respect for the fact that he was able to pull it off, but also
Yeah.
frustration. Again, it's this mirroring where Aemond is just totally sidelining Alicent. It's kind of the beginning of Jace doing the same bullshit of this just indoctrination of sexism, that like, no, we need like the warrior prince and his big dragon. To the
Right.
note, in the book, Jace is making a big deal about, if the 3 of us go to King's Landing together, we stand a chance against Vhagar. If we bring Caraxes and Cyrax and Vermax, even she will have to deal with us, meaning Vhagar. And Rhaenyra is just kind of not having it in that way. But I love where we get here with the dragons. I actually should talk about Corlys a little bit first. Corlys getting pulled back into the fold as the hand. I love Baela going to him and making this offer, and him really mourning the loss of Rhaenys, and like, what was the point of all of this? I did this for her, and if she's gone, like, what am I here for? And really the angst that he has towards this queen, that now he's being asked to go and serve. And yet again, it takes like that imposing man to come into the room to kind of get this whole Black Small Council in line, that once Corlys steps in there, like the bullshit ends, man. It's like the babysitter showed up, LT.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I think that part of Rhaenyra's calculation in asking Baela to ask him, if he would be the hand, is exactly that she would have, him on her side to lend, if she needed more legitimacy, I guess, with the men in the room, he would be able to do that. He's also been to war, unlike many of the people in the small council, because he fought the Triarchy.
Yep.
So, like, his wisdom and knowledge and experience is definitely needed. And also, just like as a show of kindness and respect toward, kin, to just be like, just because, I too am hurting from Rhaenys not being here anymore. And this will give you something to do. Like, this will give us all something to do toward like a greater goal. Because if we just all, get sucked in by the grief, then the Greens are gonna win this thing, and then we're all dead.
Steve Toussaint is so good in this part too. He's another one that just like smashed me. Him dealing with the grief, just that scene of him sitting at like at the Driftmark throne there. It it's really powerful stuff, and I kind of love it. And I think the show didn't do as good of a job as like Corlys Valerian is a living legend in his own time. Like
Yeah.
this guy has sailed off the map. He has sailed further east than we have ever seen Daenerys in Game of Thrones and come back to tell the tale. Like there is this whole notion, even when Viserys is king, that's part of why Corlys is so aggressive and wants this name to ring out across the ages because he has accomplished so much as an individual. But as he
Mhm.
comes to these later years of his life, he realizes that that's like fleeting, right? His name can endure as this hero of legend, but what about his house and his family and their
Right.
role in the future? And in so many ways, he is a more imposing and kind of impressive figure to the realms than Viserys ever was. Like this guy is respected above and beyond most human beings in Westeros at this point. It really is like kind of a coup to get him in the room with you as your hand, let alone. It's not just about, I think, the Black Council in the room as the message, once that echoes out into the world that Corlys Valerian is Rhaenyra's hand, there are others out there that will like stand with her because of that. So it's a really
Right.
big setup, and I love the way that we're moving Bela and Rhaena forward just as these two princesses and their role and the distinction between them as siblings in a show that we've talked so much about, Daemon and Viserys, this weight where one of them is a dragon rider and one is not. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I am actually going to make you the official royal babysitter. Take the children to go to the Reach, go post up in the Eyrie and bring these baby dragons and try to convince Lady Jane that this is good enough. And I kind of love where we get to that. Then we're going to discover there's a wild dragon out
Yeah.
there near the Eyrie. LT, this is crazy.
Yeah, a wild dragon? What?
What?
I didn't know that was a thing. And I
It,
guess at this time, like dragons are so plentiful that they can just run off and do whatever they want.
it's a fascinating thing that they talk about in the book, right? But Dragonstone is this island. It's volcanic. It's got all the dragon glass. It's a very well suited environment for the dragons. And so the dragons are like breeding and living there. And many of them get claimed, but some never do. And so the book notes these three particular wild dragons at this point, one of whom is called Grey Ghost, that lives on like the kind of eastern side of Dragonstone and pretty much hangs out over the narrow sea eating fish. One of them is called the Cannibal, and every couple of years it comes like crashing into the dragon nests and eats a bunch of eggs and like, kills another dragon
Oh.
or two. Yeah, he's like brutal. And the Cannibal is like old. They say that the Cannibal, there are rumors that the Cannibal lived on Dragonstone before Aegon even conquered the Seven Kingdoms. So that's a big question. And then this last dragon's name is the best of all three, Sheep Stealer.
Yeah.
And they call him Sheep Stealer because he eats sheep. And it's so funny the way they describe him in the books, where they're like, occasionally he would eat a shepherd that bothered him or tried to interfere. But generally, he was really happy to leave the shepherds alone. And he did once in a while eat a sheepdog. But can you blame him? You know? So the sheep stealer is clearly hanging out near the area. This is a really interesting piece of setup that I think is fun. And it's a cool idea to start to incorporate wild dragons, you know?
Yeah, especially because, there's kind of like the dangling Chad that is Rhaena. Like there's no way that she's not gonna ride a dragon, you know? There's just no way. And so I keep like looking for all of the ways that she could get a dragon. And this sheep stealer one could be something.
Did you love her complaining to the toddler about her lot in life? That was another like much needed moment of levity. I just
Yeah.
loved it so much, you know?
Sometimes you're just stuck with kids, and you don't have anyone else to complain to, and so you complain to the kids.
Especially when you're a teenager, right? You're in that like
Yeah.
strange adolescent space where like the adults don't really take you seriously or whatever. They're all a little bit younger in the books. They're only supposed to be like 16, 15. And I think we can imagine them a bit
Okay.
older. But I really loved that whole setup. And I think it's pretty interesting that we have this dragon sheep stealer posted up near the Eyrie. But we're going to get Corlys on the council. And this is where Jace has got like his grand idea about like, wait a minute. What about the extra Targaryens? There might be some extra Targaryens lurking out there. Now, the way it's presented in the book, again, like George Martin is so rooted in the medieval history and he's so kind of connected with our own actual history and bringing forward a lot of the worst aspects of things that we did to one another, that there's this idea in the books that gets dealt with a lot during King Jaehaerys's reign, which is the notion of first night. It's the same as like the actual historical law of prima nocte, which was like a very big deal in Braveheart, wherein the local lord has like the right to the wife on the night of her wedding. And this
Yeah.
is like a really big deal. But Jaehaerys's wife, the old king's wife, Queen Alysanne, finds out about it and like kind of loses her shit and is like, yeah, my lords, we are done with this. Like, you best be ending this practice. But so in the book, it's presented much more overtly that there are these kind of Targaryen bastards floating around all over the place. That there are like even noble houses that their true-born sons actually had like Targaryen lineage. So how did this work for you in terms of the show, like conveying this information? Did it land right? Did it seem plausible?
Oh yeah, it totally seems plausible. Like there are only so many like rich families,
Right. Yeah.
so people are bound to intermarry at some point. It's just hilarious, like how they were grasping at straws because they were like, your grandmother's grandmother was a
And
Targaryen princess.
this is like a major point of contention among some hardcore fans because this guy's grandmother's grandmother is not actually documented anywhere on the Targaryen bloodlines. And it seems like she's probably like a made up Targaryen to facilitate the show. Now, Sir Sefton Darkland is the head of the Kingsguard, and he does go try to take Sea Smoke, who was like Laenor's dragon, and burned to death terribly. Yeah, but this whole scene is so freaking awesome. The whole ritual, it's so cool. The way he's like so honored. You elevate me, my queen. And she's trying to like give him the like, listen, you don't have to do this. And he's already like one knee down, ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if someone offers you the opportunity to claim a dragon, then especially if you're a knight, and like your entire thing is to like keep accumulating honor for yourself and your house, then this is like the greatest honor that the queen could bestow upon you is a dragon, like to fight for her cause. So this was great. And it's always really interesting in this show to see the people who are like tend to the dragons.
Yeah, I love these dragon keepers with their Valyrian. And we see
Hmm.
as he's kind of immolated that he takes his own life. He pulls this knife, the dragon keeper, which is a really
Yeah.
interesting little beat amidst that. Very, very cool, though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like if you spend enough time with them, you've probably been burned a time or two. So you think that it's probably better to take your own life than to have to endure dragon fire,
I saw
especially in metal armor.
Yeah, for real. In the metal armor, brutal. I saw some speculation. I believe Ryan Condal had like talked about it on his podcast pretty early on that if we pay attention to the kind of costuming of the dragon keepers, each of them has a dragon glass dagger at their belt. And he had talked about we'll see why that's important. And I've seen a bit of speculation as to whether or not is this just like these guys know the situation that they're in and it's a pragmatic kind of merciful end to the fate of burning to death? Or is it like a ritual sacrifice? Do they, like, once they're immolated in that way, believe that they're kind of giving themselves to some higher purpose? And it's just a fascinating thing to wonder about, because the Dragon Keepers are clearly not Targaryen nobles, so they don't get a lot of
Right.
attention in the history, right? It's all
Yeah.
very incidental, and we're getting it through the interpretation of, like, Grand Maester Munkin, who just gives this simple stuff like, dragons are not like horses, and we don't really know anything about the bond between rider and dragon. But what we do know is that when somebody tries to ride a dragon or to mount a dragon, that if the dragon is not into it, that person dies through fire and blood, you know? So to get to see it felt really powerful. I love the little bit of a bait too, where it seems like, oh, he's got it. And he's got the moment of like, I've
Yeah.
did it. I've did it.
Yeah. Famous last words.
Sea Smoke, really pretty dragon. I love the whole like design here.
Someone, there's been a lot of tweets pointing out that the similarities between Drogon and Sea Smoke.
Oh yeah,
to the
actually,
point where
sure.
people were like, I'm so glad that they decided to hire the same actor to play both dragons.
Great call. Yeah, it must be rough for him to sit through makeup in the morning.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
long procedure. He really does. While I was sick last week, I like was rewatching episode 5, and then in my kind of fever delirium napping, Game of Thrones just automatically started playing LT. And next thing I know, I'm like halfway back into Game of Thrones, and I'm like, oh no, are we here again? But so having recently just seen a lot of Drogon, they do. They're the way that like the head is built with all like I'm a professional dungeon master. I run Dungeons and Dragons professionally. I have, I guess, spent the last 30 years professionally studying like dragon head features and horn placement. And
Yeah.
it's like a lot
Yeah.
of similarity. I love Sea Smoke, but this is what's going to set us up for this whole other beat that we will get later with the man Adam of Hull, as we will see like he and his brother back at their house. Alan is notably wearing this turban when he meets with
Yeah.
Corlys down on the beach, and then here he is shaving his very silver hair.
Yeah.
LT.
It's interesting how he got silver hair, but his brother didn't.
So yeah, in the book, they both have very silver hair, and there is like a whole thing that they kind of go through. Their mother is alive, and the mother won't talk about it. And Rhaenys is depicted as a little bit less okay with what is happening here. And so they play it off that Adam and Alan are supposedly the bastard sons of Laenor, is what they say in the book. That's what his mother says. So Corlys is able to kind of develop a relationship with them without ever taking direct responsibility for them. But I love the silver hair beat. I think it's such a great telegraph. And the whole like meet cute that we get on the beach later between Sea Smoke and Adam is one of my favorite scenes of the show, like full stop.
It's so good. He's just like, only pretty men will ride me. So let me chase after this guy. Just the shot where, I mean, like Adam doing the smart thing of running into the trees and thinking that he's gotten away, and the shot of the bird like going by overhead, and then all of a sudden this dragon comes out of nowhere, and he goes from seeming menacing to just kind of, you know, seeming like he wants attention almost like if a stray dog chased you, which by the way, can someone please adopt that poor dog?
Different dog. It was definitely not the same dog. I don't know if they were trying to pan it off.
Dog?
No, it's a very similar looking dog. I mean, unless like maybe somebody gave it a bath and it's just a different color this week. I'm pretty sure it was a different dog. It looked to me like a different dog, but like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I was like, oh,
I thought
this
that
poor
was the same dog.
Like somebody better adopt this dog. But then I was rewatching the episode. I'm like, I don't think so. I think this is a slightly different colored dog.
Okay. I thought it was the same dog.
I just love the inclusion of more dogs in House of the Dragon. I'll be honest with you. Like House of the Dog, I would be here for that.
Not a ton of dogs in Game of Thrones, like the dire wolves, but they are wolves.
And they did not have like great sustainability across the series.
No, not at all. But yeah, just the idea that, you know, a dragon claims you is really interesting and cool. And it's really great to watch this actor Clinton Liberty go from just like terror to being like, oh wait, it's not gonna eat me? Like, what are we doing here?
I love this guy. I mean, he's not had much to do yet, and his brother is a more notable actor.
Hmm.
Fathered and Raised by Wolves. He cameoed over on Critical Role for a little run too. He does a lot of tabletop role playing games online, which I'd love to see. Give me my D&D nerds on Westeros television shows, and I'm all in. But this guy, they talked about how this whole scene, like he did his own stunts. That's all him running through the woods.
Oh
This
wow.
is one of the goofiest things ever, LT. But like, if you want to onboard me to a character, give me that scene of the character
Yeah,
running through the woods, jumping over logs and ducking under
right.
branches, and just be like cool and athletic in the middle of like your fantasy adventure story. And I'm so in. I talk about this all the time with my friend Taylor Ball over on the What Did I Miss podcast. But like, this is the kind of thing I did playing in the woods as a little kid. And it's so immediately transportive and brings me there. And that transition of like fear to recognition to like awe as sea smoke comes down in over them and they get to face, it's very exciting and a really kind of great moment. I love giving the dragons some character and making them a little bit more distinct. I think the show has done a great job with the physical design so far. And the more that we're able to like have them as characters on the show, like Drogon was a character by the end of Game of
Yeah, he
Thrones, you
definitely
know?
was. I still think about Drogon, honestly.
He's out there
I mean,
somewhere.
he's out there somewhere, and I still think about him. But yeah, Sea Smoke definitely becoming one of my like all-time favorite dragons in this episode by just being like, no, I'm gonna burn you alive, but I will go out and find someone who smells like my old rider.
Very cool. I dig it a lot. So Missaria, who is emerging as this absolute MVP player
Hmm.
for our Black Queen, Rhaenyra. I love the whole send them food. I love the
Yeah.
whole like kind of whisper war that she's got her old people at the brothel kind of promoting this whole stance about the King Aegon and the Prince Regent Aemon letting us starve while they feast in the Red Tower. And here's drunken Ulf the Sot, like Viserys would never, he would never, he liked his nice things, but he made sure his people were fed. I love everything that is happening in this brothel. And the fact that Missaria has become this absolute stealth power player on Team Black is like one of my favorite things emerging across the season.
Yeah, it's such a great move to just send them food. Just like send some Uber Eats and see what happens.
It's so cool. The little rowboats all coming with it's just like, it's perfect.
Yeah. And I guess they would have to be timed to like, very well to all arrive where they arrive,
It's
like
a
with
good thing the Lord of the Tides is the hand of the Queen because
exactly.
he knows those schedules, right?
Yeah. And I also love the look on Jace's face when Mysaria is like, our gift has arrived. And Jace is like, what gift? No one tells me anything. And he doesn't know what to make of the relationship that's blooming between his mother and Mysaria either. So it's just like watching Jace be exasperated is hilarious to me. I don't know why, but
It's
it's just
very
like
fun.
his little face. He doesn't know what to do about it. So I really appreciated the relationship that was blooming between Rhaenyra and Mysaria just because it's really cool just to see female friendships
Mhm.
happen in
Yeah,
this world. They're so few and far between. And then they end up taking it a step further than even that in this episode.
ooh la la. It's shades of Daenerys and Missandei of you have such a different worldview and
Yeah.
experience and background that your insight is kind of infinitely valuable to me, along with that, like two women with the kind of mutual experience of being able to look at each other and communicate in that way without,
Hmm.
without having the imposition of all the kind of male ideology shoved down on top of them. I really thought it was powerful. And the way that, Mysaria embodies the sort of Tyrion vibes of he going to Daenerys, like, gosh, if there's an option, then I'm picking you. You are clearly the better of the options for the people, right? I'm like invoking everybody, but it's Varys, right? It's the small folk and the protection of the
Right.
realm, and Mysaria being so rooted in that is great. And it's something that doesn't get any real attention in the books because Mysaria is again being talked about as like the white worm, the secret counselor for Rhaenyra in that way. It's a small note, but if we go back to season 1 of House of the Dragon, Viserys never had like the official Master of Whispers, right?
Right.
Like Larys doesn't have that position. He didn't want that dignity. And so in the same way that like Rhaenyra has not brought Mysaria into the council chamber, it's not an official position in that capacity, the need for this more kind of subversive warfare. And the fact that this subversive warfare is being won through like acts of goodness and justice along with like the propaganda, it's very, very cool. And I love the way that that relationship evolves in that final scene of episode 6 or towards the end, as Masari will reveal how she got this scar on her throat. And I know there was a lot of speculation about it over the past few weeks of like a slave collar, or was it
Right.
Damon when he choked you, or what it was, but we learned the story of her father. It's very dark and chilling. And the way that Rhaenyra like reacts to it, it's just such a powerful moment between these two that like leapt off the screen for me, at least.
Yeah, and I love the fact that, like, first of all, it's just Rhaenyra's initial instinct to hear a story like that from someone and just go give them a hug,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is never happens in the world of Game of Thrones. Like, unless someone's hugging you so they could stab you in the back. And then there's the fact that like um these two women are like connecting over this, and the way that it was played, like in the very first episode, was that there was something between Rhaenyra and Alicent, right? But they were obviously never able to explore that. So it's been seeded from the very beginning. I love that apparently the kiss wasn't initially scripted, and
Yeah,
that,
this blew my mind when you told me this.
yeah, that it was Emma Darcy's idea to just like naturally evolve that into like them embracing into a kiss. And it makes so much sense. And it's just such a great moment. Like, we know that Rhaenyra is an ally because of her sending her husband away, like Laenor away, to
Mm-hmm.
go be with his lover and like live his life.
Mm-hmm.
But we've never, like, she's never gotten to explore any other side of her sexuality because she was married off at such a young age. And before that, she was just being groomed by Daemon.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen her assert herself in terms of being with Harwin Strong, but that's just like a traditional like gender role exploration of sexuality. Like, this is something different that we don't see very often in this world. So it's really cool that this kiss happens, and also like awful that they have to hide it
Oh
because
yeah.
it's a sin.
It's a real, it feels so bad as the door opens and they have to fall to these very kind of traditional moment of concealing what's going on here. And you could begin to imagine the way that rumors would start to evolve. There's all this kind of speculation in the books, and Mishari is very written off as like a witch with her potions and the white worm and a foreigner. There's a lot of othering that's happening, not
Yeah.
just because she's like a woman who is not of noble birth, but because she's like an outsider to this kind of the kingdoms and the lands of Westeros in that way. But the whole thing with like Alicent and Rhaenyra always felt really charged. And you can imagine the world where Rhaenyra is just much more empowered. She has so much more privilege than anybody else around her as part of the royal family, that she could entertain ideas like perhaps like a same-sex relationship in ways that other people never would, because of just the privilege. And then when you layer in the religious element and the fact that the Targaryens don't hold to the seven and the gods of the seven other than as the kind of official state sponsored religion of this continent, they really aren't that adherent to it. Whereas Alicent is this very pious person. And so the tension that there would have been in that kind of just relationship, even just beginning to come to terms with what those feelings might be and how Rhaenyra might be willing to explore them while Alicent would like repress them. So then you
Yeah.
put her at this moment where she's so isolated. I mean, she's lost everybody around her. Her closest ally, like what, her husband, her creepy
Yeah.
grooming uncle that has like taken his car and driven off to like head to the summer house where he's like off the grid. Her son's now like nagging at her about like, where is your husband? We need men to deal with this. She just lost Rainey's, and she's so isolated in that way to have this one person that will speak to her about these truths that could easily go over her head about the small folk, and also just to communicate some actual like human emotion, to show that kind of trust, to tell this very vulnerable story that doesn't garner anything for Bissaria. There's nothing to be gained from communicating that like expressly. And so I just love the organic moment there. And it feels authentic that like they would find solace in each other, because both of them are pretty much entirely alone in this keep filled with angry men that are like, when do we go bring the dragons to war though?
Right. And how frustrating must it be for Rhaenyra to be a dragon rider, but
Oh
yet she's
yeah.
not allowed to leave.
Oh yeah.
Because she is the crown. Like she is the one that they're fighting for. So it has to be just terrible for her. And I feel like Massaria kind of, knows what it's like to be put into a cage in a way,
Mm-hmm.
and shares that with her. And they have this very sincere moment with each other where they're able to connect. I mean, I've seen some criticisms being leveled at just the like, can't we just have a female friendship? Uh,
Fair. That's, yeah, I get that.
which is completely fair. But I also think that it's a way more interesting direction to be going in, to have to put Rhaenyra in this situation with Massaria and leave her to try to figure how things are going to look in her world.
I'm 100% with you there. I think that this is way more interesting, and I certainly appreciate the sentiment that there is this trope of like women cutting each other down that is just like prevalent across all of fiction. And like, yes, it's nice that you see some women be friends with each other. If you're yearning for that in your fantasy, can I recommend a little property over at Amazon Prime called The Wheel of Time? There's lots of women that are just friends with each other, and it's great. I love it. Also, lesbian power couples. If you love that, it's there for you too. You got all of it. I really love like what you're getting at though, which is the way that they have to use unconventional weapons, right? We get the whole moment of like Rhaenyra looking at the old history book. Here's Queen Visenya, who was a dragon rider and rode to war, and she's got her sword and she's wielding it around. And Massaria, like, it's very becoming on you, but Rhaenyra like drops the sword because those are not the weapons that they can wield to the same effect, right? And
Right.
the whole frustration of like, but I have this dragon. I am a weapon in this war. I'm the most powerful weapon and you can't use me. I mean, like, all of that kind of like late in the day Daenerys throne stuff is right there too. You
Mm-hmm.
really feel the relationship between these two, especially while she's in Dragonstone. I love it. It felt really organic to me as somebody that's like very invested in the book and is a little bit of like a canon nerd. And like, why are you making up Targaryens to be Stefan Darkland's great great grandmother? George gave you 100,000 of them already. Like, I could get uptight about that kind of stuff. This doesn't even vaguely bother me. It's such an upgrade from what we got in the text. And I think it's just infinitely more compelling especially when we remember Mysaria's arc in season 1, that Daemon like stole an egg and committed treason when he came back to Dragonstone because supposedly she was pregnant with his heir. But we'll learn the story that like, no, she wasn't. He just, it made all of this even more charged, and that Rhaenyra had to be the kind of one to come here and confront her. Part of this revelation is about, look, like that the way Daemon manipulates both of us, right?
Right.
And like that's in the subtext that I think unites these two so tightly in a way that really feels satisfying to me.
Yeah, and it's also just that, we have the line where Mysaria goes, "Well, you have me." We see them like spending these quiet moments together when Jace leaves and it's just Mysaria and Rhaenyra there, and they're just like overlooking Dragonstone in silence because they can just spend time together in silence. The thing that has really gotten on my nerves, though, is that people have been review bombing this episode, and I can't think of any reason why you'd review bomb this episode in particular other than this kiss.
Yeah, I could see that, I mean, I've been talking about the Acolyte all season, and the Acolyte got assaulted. The Star Wars fandom, for whatever it's worth, is like ground zero of the culture war. And that show just ate a lot of unfair criticism and got review bombed into the ground over the season for stuff that had nothing to do with what the actual show was about. So, in
Yeah.
a way, I have been quietly pleased to not see such a kind of amplification of the bad faith negativity in the Westeros fandom and the House of the Dragon phantom at the use of like the Valerians. Like, I think it's such a win over the last couple of seasons that we have cast them as people of color. And it's like, it fits, it makes sense. It's not a question, it's not an issue. The show's really written well and done well. So to imagine that like that's the motivation is such a bummer. But you say it, and I'm like, yeah, what else are they crying about? I could imagine people feeling down with like the lull in the pace and the action. But if you're out there spending your energy in an election year, like review bombing television shows because they're too woke, you got problems, man. Go touch grass, you freaking trolls, grumpkins. I would like exile them beyond the wall, LT.
I mean, put it on a shirt,
Yeah.
Like, you're right. Like with the Acolyte, you couldn't even tweet that you were
No.
personally excited for the Acolyte
Mm-hmm.
using the hashtag without a bunch of like disgruntled fans being like,
It was a
"Oh,
bad.
you like it's terrible." And it's like, no one asked you. Simply shut up. No one asked you. If you don't want to watch the show, no one's forcing you to watch the show. It's like it can't even exist unless it's for them, and that's really
No,
annoying.
I think that, part of I talk about it on a lot of these different podcasts, but part of what's so tricky about enjoying art in the modern ecosystem is being able to like kind of take it in removed from all of the bullshit meta commentary, which sometimes gets very toxic and critical unnecessarily and hostile. And it really could color the way that the art affects you. I mean, that's what this stuff is at the end of the day. It may sound pretentious and high-minded, but I am nothing if not an elitist jerk, LT. And this is art, and it may be like pop culture mainstream art, and it's out there to make somebody a whole lot of money. Certainly, go capitalism. But that doesn't remove the fact that like a lot of really inspired people came together to create something that they thought was worth creating. And sometimes it's going to come together and be better than their wildest expectations. And sometimes it's going to fall short. And sometimes it's going to touch you and move you. And sometimes it's going to aggravate you because they played with your favorite characters badly. But just like, shut the hell up, man. Go complain to your friends offline and like let people enjoy what they're going to enjoy. The world is dark and full of terrorism. We don't need your bullshit.
Yeah. Couldn't say it better.
That's my piece, LT. We had two, I thought, very interesting episodes of House of the Dragon setting us up for the penultimate episode next week. Anything that we didn't hit that you would like to? I know we're kind of moving through it quick and fluidly this week, but anything that's like sticking with you that we did not discuss?
I mean, I know we're gearing up for another battle because the Gawain and Kristen are on the march. So I feel like Gwen's about to die, and he's pretty cool. You know, like given the people that, you know, we've been introduced to, Gwen is like the most harmless person that you could find on this show.
Honestly, pretty decent guy. He just wants to sleep in an inn once in a while,
Yeah.
have a feather bed. You
Yeah.
know, he's not that bad. I like Gwen. I like having characters that are not like absolute scumbags on the show. You know, we
Yeah.
need a couple of them. But yeah, tactically, what is happening here in the Riverlands is you have the Lannisters coming down from the kind of northwest. You have Kristen Cole pushing up out of King's Landing from the kind of southeast, and they're trying to collapse these two encroaching armies onto Harrenhal, where zany Uncle Daemon is having his crazy nightmares. And hopefully, Aemond, the one-eyed prince, is hoping that his angry uncle flies out and will meet him in the field of battle so that they can duke it out. So we'll see how that works out for you, Prince One Eye. I'm really excited to see where we get next week. I want to see my man Adam of Hall flying around on the back of Seasmoke. It's going to be pretty exciting. I think we're going to have a really fun end to the season, and I'm very delighted to be back with you breaking it down this week, LT.
Yeah, this is great, and I'm just looking forward to each episode. Honestly, like it's like the highlight of my week.
It really is. It maybe have been a better highlight this week. We had some good news in our little ecosystem, at least, and I'm pretty excited about that. But this is at least the second to best thing that happened to me this week.
Yeah, fair.
We'll be back in 1 week's time. Until then, LT, what do you got going on? Where can people find you?
Well, the Olympics are upon us, and in anticipation, there's a new Simone Biles documentary called Simone Biles Rising that's been released on Netflix. So I sat down with Chappelle to talk about that documentary for the recap kickback. And then we just kind of got into the Olympic gymnastics team for the US, as well as what the Olympics, like what we were looking forward to in the Olympic Games. So we're supposed to get back together to chat halfway through the Olympics to see what stories have come out. And so that's been really fun. And I'm looking forward to that. Other than that, you can follow me on Twitter at LK Starks, where I will be letting you know what else I'll be talking about.
Go give her a follow there, folks. I'm excited because it was just announced today that the Olympic Council okayed esports. And so I'm not a sports guy, but I do follow like the League of Legends World Championships every year. And I think they're going to play League of Legends at the Olympics this year, which is like insane to me. Insane. And I don't know how you feel about it as an actual proponent of physical sports where people move their bodies beyond their fingers, but I'm really excited for esports at the Olympics. I'm doing a bunch of stuff over here at Screen and Page. You can find me at DM Philly on the internet, wherever I might be. Screen and Page over on YouTube. You can catch these video podcasts at Screen Page Pod is our social media. Go give us a follow to keep up with everything that we're doing. You got the boys finale coverage, the Acolyte finale coverage. Taylor and I are doing What Did I Miss? We're talking through the Black Cauldron this week. Cobra Kai season 6 part 1 dropped. Got together with Marissa and Jason to talk through that. And the new Batman animated series dropping over on Amazon Prime. Kevin Mahadeo and I will be getting together to unpack that sometime over the next couple of weeks. So we're certainly keeping busy heading into August. It was a pleasure as always, LT. We will be back in 1 week's time. But until then, just remember, the Iron Throne is a burden to bear and not a prize to be won.